How you doing? Saying hi to you guys out there on the social medias. The uh the big bad social medias. We have Facebook, we have YouTube going out live right now. This is Piano Technicians Master Classes. We have a special presentation today. We typically do a radio hour session for about an hour, which we will do today. But this radio hour is going to be a part of our master class this month. And what we'll do is we'll do about an hour of master class as the radio hour, which means it's completely open to the public. Anybody can join us. And then at the end of the hour, we're going to sign off like we typically do. But if you're a paid subscriber or you want to subscribe last minute and jump into the full master class, you can continue with us. But we will jump on a different Zoom link and we'll close out the live stream. I'm going to quickly, we got to make sure we let people in. Is everybody in? Admit everyone. Justice, if you could keep an eye on the folks in the Zoom who need to be let in. Hello, everyone, getting into the Zoom. I was just setting some context for Facebook and YouTube, which is just that today is a special day. Typically, we just do an hour radio hour session, and we do a master class separately every month. This month, we are kind of doing a fun little merge of the two. So we'll do half of our master class as the radio hour, and then immediately after, for those that are paid subscribers or have paid for the one-off master class, you can continue and join the full master class. You can see my son behind me. He thinks he's hiding somehow, but that is not happening. Just 1 minute, buddy. Just give me a couple minutes, okay? So that's not typical, but it's fun. Little kids around, they might as well be. So I'm going to do the intro of the show, and then we're going to hand it over to Molly. She's going to take off. She is a seasoned veteran at these type of wonderful master classes, introducing and expanding upon the neuroscience of practicing. And by the way, if you're out there and you say, hey, I'm not a piano person or a musician, I think it's totally fine. I think this stuff is going to apply to all sorts of different types of practice. So just to kick it off, I will tell you this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. And what we do here, we gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, and makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. Find out more on PianoTechniciansMasterclass.com. You may also subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour for just $16 a month and get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. Join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Additionally, love to mention the podcast, the audio-only version of the show. And recently, we started releasing episodes. So we were on a hiatus a little bit. We had huge backlog with all these archival episodes. And the members get the video, but as a podcast, we can release the audio only. And so we're doing that, and we're continuing to do that now. So our listenership is excited to hear new episodes, and it's always been a wonderful endeavor. We've got global audiences and a lot of support throughout the world. In the top 100, top 10, even #1 in various locales in the performing arts category on iTunes. You can subscribe to the Piano Tech Radio Hour, as I mentioned, and also don't forget about our social medias. We've got LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, check out the Substack, where we have written summaries and explanations of masterclasses from the vault, and that's at pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com, and of course the newsletter on our website. Just jump on, first name, email, sign up, and you'll continue to learn about the wonderful happenings going on at Piano Tech Radio Hour. All right, let us transition to our lovely and intelligent guest for today, Molly Gebrian. She's been on the radio hour before. I'm not going to do an extensive bio as I typically do because she'll introduce herself as part of her presentation. But just to give some context of what I'm excited about, some of you may be aware I studied neuroscience in addition to my studies of music. And so I've always been fascinated with the brain and how it intersects, especially with practicing. That's one of the reasons I got into neuroscience. I learned how it helped me practice better, and it was fascinating. So she's going to go deep into these territories. And again, you're going to learn how practice can be improved, and you're going to be able to apply it, to your piano tuning skills, not just your piano playing skills, all sorts of ways that you can learn about things and get better at them. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Molly Gebrian.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to see you on what day is it? Saturday afternoon. I don't even know where I am in the world right now. Um, so before we get started, let me just give a little bit of introduction about myself and my background. I am not a pianist or a piano technician. I am a violist. So thank you for making me an honorary piano technician today. I'm very thankful to piano technicians for keeping the pianos in good shape when I play with piano. So helpful and important. Anyways, a little bit about my background. As an undergraduate, I attended Oberlin College and Conservatory, where I double majored in viola and neuroscience. And I always say that the neuroscience major was purely for fun. People often laugh at that, but it's true. I just thought brains were fascinating. I still think brains are fascinating, and I wanted to learn more about them. So I double majored in viola and neuroscience. And then after I graduated, I went to New England Conservatory for my master's, no plans whatsoever to go on with the neuroscience. But when I got to NEC, I very quickly realized that I missed the neuroscience. But here I was at a conservatory. I obviously couldn't take neuroscience classes. So I was very fortunate that NEC allowed me to do a number of independent studies looking into aspects of music and the brain that I had started to get interested in when I was at Oberlin. And then after I graduated from NEC, I went to Rice University where I did my doctorate again in viola, but I was back at a research institution. So I'm very grateful to Rice that they allowed me to take graduate level neuroscience classes with the PhD neuroscience students pretty much the entire time I was there, even though that had nothing to do with my degree plan as a DMA student in viola. So I did lots of neuroscience at Rice. I worked in the lab for a long time. I was the assistant director on two interdisciplinary symposia on music and the brain. I did a whole bunch of stuff. It was really fantastic. For the last 10 years, I've been a viola professor, first at a university in Wisconsin, most recently at the University of Arizona. But I've continued to do presentations and write and make videos for social media on the science of practicing. Last summer, I moved back to the Boston area and I now teach at New England Conservatory. I teach classes and workshops on the science of practicing, and I also work with students one-on-one on practicing. And last summer, my book came out. Those of you watching the video can see, audio only can't, but it was published by Oxford University Press last summer. Learn faster, perform better. What is the name of my book? A Musician's Guide to the Neuroscience of Practicing. So now this is what I do full time. I help people practice better, which is really wonderful. I get to work with people from all over the world, all sorts of instruments, all ages and levels. So today, our presentation is somewhat interactive, by which I mean after each section of the presentation, you're going to have an opportunity to try out some of the practice methods that we talk about. So if you are able to be in the same space as your piano or whatever your instrument is, that will be really helpful so that you can try these things out. You will be on mute the whole time. Nobody's going to have to hear you practice, so don't panic about that. But I've found that it helps people to actually apply the stuff that we're talking about. Then we'll have a little bit of time to discuss what you just tried, and then we'll come back and talk about new information. At the very end of the 2 hours, there will also be time for sort of general Q&A discussion, whatever you want. So that's the plan for today. At the top of the hour, we'll take a little bit of a break to switch to the other Zoom link, but also, as we'll see today, breaks are really important for learning. So it's a good learning strategy too. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and make sure I can still see all of you. Okay, there we go. So here's the plan for today. Here's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to start with some basics about how the brain learns. Then we're going to talk about two related topics, the power of breaks and random practice. I always say that these two topics are the most controversial, not at all in terms of the science. They're very well settled science, but they often go against how most people were taught to practice and how we think we should be practicing. And then finally, we're going to end with mental practice. So I've picked these topics today because I think they're the most important sort of foundational skills when it comes to good practice. They're also the things that people often don't know anything about. And I've seen make the biggest difference both for me personally and for my students in terms of practicing more effectively and getting more out of their time. So that's the plan. Let's get started. So if you ever took any kind of life science class, this slide is probably a familiar image, but if not, that's totally fine. So what you're looking at on the left here is a picture of a neuron. That's what the cells in our brain look like. And down here where the blow up is, it's showing a zoomed in picture of what happens at the synapse. So the synapse is the tiny little space in between two neurons where all the magic happens in our brains, essentially. So anytime you want to do anything at all, the neurons in your brain have to talk to each other. And the way that this communication starts is the first neuron will spit out neurotransmitter into the synapse. And neurotransmitters, there's a whole bunch of them. They're just chemicals that our brains use to communicate. The famous ones that most people have heard of are serotonin, dopamine, and adrenaline. I think probably most people have heard of those at this point. There's many others, but those are the famous kinds. But anyway, the first neuron will spit out neurotransmitter into the synapse. And if the neuron on the other side of the synapse has receptors that are the right shape and size, the neurotransmitter will bind to those receptors and cause an electrical change in the second neuron. So the analogy that's often given here in neuroscience classes is that of a lock and a key. So the receptor is the lock, the neurotransmitter is the key. The key goes into the lock. If the shapes match, you can unlock the lock, open the door. In this case, the unlocking that happens is that electrical signal, that electrical change that happens in the second neuron. So that electrical change, that electrical charge will go flying down this long arm of the neuron that sticks out over here. It's called the axon. So the electrical charge goes flying down the axon. When it gets to the end of the axon, the process repeats itself essentially. So neurotransmitter spit out, binds to the receptors, causes an electrical change. So all of the communication in our brains is a chemical signal that gets translated into an electrical signal that gets translated back into a chemical signal and so on forever, basically. As long as you're alive, this is going on at all times in your brain. In order to get better at anything, in order to learn anything new, there have to be physical changes that happen in your brain, including at the synapse. It's not really within the scope of our presentation today to talk about the specific physical changes that happen at the synapse. But I want you to hold on to this idea that in order to learn, in order to get better at things, there have to be physical changes in your brain because that idea is going to come back later when we're talking about breaks. So hold on to that. But for right now, I want to talk about what happens when you are doing something complicated, like playing an instrument. Because obviously it's going to be more than just two neurons communicating, hopefully, right? It's more than just two neurons communicating with each other. When you want to do something complicated, there's a bunch of neurons that have to talk to each other, and that's called a neuronal pathway, a pathway of neurons. And I really like that language because it leads me to a useful analogy. So let me set up my analogy, and then we will come back to brains. Okay, so here's the analogy. You have to imagine that what you're looking at right now is a giant field of snow so big that if you're standing on one side, you can't see to the other side. On one side of the snow is someplace bad, someplace that you don't want to go. The story I always tell about this, I was giving a version of this presentation like 15 years ago now to a group of middle school students in a giant auditorium. And I got to this part with the bad place, the skull and crossbones on one side of the snow. And this little kid in the back, he didn't even raise his hand. He just shouts out, "That's the dirty socks." And everybody in the room, it was like a cartoon. Everyone's brain whipped around in unison to look at this kid like, what are you even talking about? And he was just looking back at us like, what's wrong with all of you? It was so strange and funny. Ever since, this bad place has been known as the dirty socks. So now you know the story of the dirty socks. So on one side of the snow, someplace bad, dirty socks, you don't want to go there. Also on that side of the snow is your house, which is hopefully a happy place, someplace you do want to go. On the other side of the snow is where all of your friends live. And this is a new house. You've just moved in. Nobody's ever been to your house before, and you decide to have a housewarming party. But you are absolutely terrible about giving directions and instructions. You just send out a message to people saying, "Hey, I'm having a party at my house tonight. Come on over. It's the other side. It's on the other side of the snow." But again, they've never been there. This snowy field is so big they can't see your house from where they are. And the only pathway through the snow is this one that goes to the dirty socks. So unfortunately, your friends are probably not going to arrive at the party. They're going to arrive at the dirty socks, right? They just know, okay, I have to cross the snow. Oh, look, here's a path. I might as well take that path. That makes sense. And they take it and they arrive in the wrong place. So coming back to brains, this would be like you have a neuronal pathway of neurons, a bunch of neurons talking to each other, that results in something you don't want. So thinking about playing music, this could be wrong note, wrong rhythm, bad sound, like whatever it is that's not working. If that's the only pathway you have, you kind of have no choice. It's not going to come out the way you want. Just like your friends, they don't know any better. They just see a path. They know, okay, I have to cross the snow. Must be this one. Your brain also doesn't know any better. I'm going to say versions of this several times today, but your brain doesn't know good from bad pathways. It just knows the pathways that are there. It just knows the pathways you're using. So if you only have a pathway that results in wrong notes and nothing else, again, the wrong notes are gonna come out. That's all you have. So now pretend there's the second pathway that goes straight to your house. In brain terms, this would be like everything comes out exactly how you want. When I do this presentation for students, I say this would be like going into your lesson and you play for your teacher and it sounds so good. Your teacher says, literally, I have nothing to say. That was amazing. I'll see you next week, which we all know is never going to happen. But that's as teachers, that's what we sort of wish would happen. And as students, that's what we kind of strive for, right? That we really impress our teachers by our playing. But if you think about your friends now faced with these two essentially equal pathways, probably what's going to happen is some of your friends will come to this sort of crossroads in the snow, and some of your friends will decide, this pathway on the right, that one looks good. I'm going to take that one. And they'll arrive at the party. Other of your friends will be like, I like this pathway on the left. I'm going to take that one. And they will arrive, unfortunately, at the dirty socks. In brain terms, if you have two essentially equal pathways, that basically means you have a 50-50 shot of things going the way you want it to. And I don't know about you guys, but when I get on stage to perform a 50-50 shot of things going well, that doesn't feel good at all. That feels incredibly nerve-wracking. It could be amazing or it could be a disaster. What I want when I get on stage is this, right? One pathway I can guarantee, like, yes, I know how to play this. I feel confident. It feels really consistent and I can play the way I want. So the way that you accomplish this one pathway with your friends is you get out your shovel and you shovel snow over the pathway to the dirty socks, cover it up so nobody can see it, and then nobody takes it, and then everybody arrives at your house for the party. The way that you accomplish this with your brain is your brain notices when a particular pathway isn't being used and it gets rid of it while you're sleeping, which is just so cool that our brains have this mechanism for differentiating between pathways being used, pathways not being used. It's a protein tagging system. Pathways you're using get tagged with a specific protein. Any pathways that don't have that tag, the brain gets rid of them while you're sleeping. But this system only works if you don't use the pathways you don't want. So at this point in the presentation, I usually ask about how people typically practice. So I'm going to describe two common ways of practicing, and this could be practicing music or this could be practicing anything. So you can think about it however you want. But I want you to think if one of these two ways sounds like you. So way number one, I'm going to describe it in terms of music, obviously. Way number one is you start at the beginning of whatever you're trying to improve at, the beginning of the song, the beginning of the section, whatever. And you play until you make a mistake. You fix your mistake, and then you go on till you find another mistake, fix that mistake, go on, and you keep going like this. I call this the treasure hunt method. You're playing through looking for mistakes, fixing them, and then continuing to look. That's way number one. Way number two, you start at the beginning, you play until you make a mistake, then you start over again, and you try it that second time without your mistake. So my guess is one or both of these ways sounds familiar to you because they are very, very typical ways of practicing. But unfortunately, both of them are hands down the worst possible ways to practice if you want to get better. And the reason for that is even though in both cases you know you've made a mistake, right? You play, you start from the beginning, you play till you make a mistake, and either you fix it and you go on, or you start over again and you try to do it without your mistake. Even though you stopped because you know you made a mistake, you still made that mistake. You still walked down this pathway to the dirty socks. You used that pathway. And so your brain thinks, oh, we must need this pathway because we're using it. And so it keeps it. And you're like, no, I don't want it. Please get rid of it. But again, your brain doesn't know good from bad pathways. It just knows what you're using. And so you need to practice in such a way that you minimize walking down the pathway that you want to get rid of, the pathway that you don't want there in your brain. So a much better way to practice anything is to start right with what you know is giving you trouble. So in music, start right with your hard spots, whatever those may be. Often people say, well, I don't know what those are until I play it through and find them. And I don't believe you when you say that, because people always have spots that they worry about when they have to play in front of their teacher. Those spots that you worry about, like, oh, I don't know how that's going to go today. That's where you need to start when you're practicing. Those are your hard spots. That's right where you need to start. And you need to ask yourself, okay, what exactly is hard about this? Why can't I do it? And then figure out a way to break it down to figure out how to solve whatever problems you have. I often liken practicing well to being a good doctor. So if you have some complaints about your body and you go to the doctor, if they're a good doctor, they will ask you questions, right? You'll give them your health history and you'll talk to them about your symptoms or whatever. Maybe they'll run some tests to see what's going on. And then based on the results of their tests and everything you tell them, they will prescribe some sort of treatment, a medication or physical therapy or something. And then you do the treatment and hopefully you're better. If not, you go back to the doctor and the process repeats itself. This is what we need to do when we're practicing. We need to diagnose what exactly is going wrong. We need to give ourselves a treatment of some sort, which is the practice method we're going to use. And then we need to put that into practice. Hopefully solve the problem. If not, we repeat the process. I'm going to talk more about this process more in specifics in just a little bit. But when we use this process of really identifying our problem spots and really investigating what's going on, we really save ourselves a lot of time, but we also save ourselves from walking down this pathway to the dirty socks repeatedly, which you don't want to do. I said that the brain notices when particular pathways aren't being used and it gets rid of them. The brain also notices when pathways are being used a lot and it does what I call supercharging them. So for your friends, this would be like installing a moving sidewalk or something so that they can get straight to your house. In brain terms, when a pathway gets supercharged, what happens is that long arm of the neuron that sticks out that we were talking about called the axon. It gets wrapped up in something called myelin, which is just a layer of fat that wraps up around that axon and allows that electrical signal we were talking about to move more quickly down the axon. It makes that process more efficient. To you as a person on the outside, when you have a myelinated pathway, it feels like that skill is automatic. So for everybody listening, that's an adult, you know how to write very, very easily, and you can write your name, for instance, while I'm talking right now, and you don't have to think about how to make the letters, how to spell your name, anything like that. It's very easy to write your name because that pathway is myelinated. But for any of you who have small children in your lives who are just learning how to write, you know that's really hard for them, right? They really have to concentrate on making the letters properly and what order they go in. And it's a very slow process for them. That's because the pathway hasn't been myelinated yet. But as they practice writing, it will become myelinated and then it will become much easier. What we really have to protect against when we're practicing is this, myelinating the wrong pathway. So this is bad habits. This is why they feel so hard to break because they're myelinated and really, really automatic. So thinking about our analogy with our friends again, this would be like, rather than just like a pathway through the snow, this would be a whole road with guardrails and lights and everything. You can't just put a little bit of snow on the road and think nobody's going to notice there's a road there, right? You have to get a whole big construction crew to come in and completely dismantle the road, which I have never lived anywhere where they completely dismantle a road and it's like there was never a road there. It's essentially the same thing in our brains. Once you have a myelinated pathway, it's there. There's no mechanism to tell the brain to take the myelin off. That only happens in neurodegenerative diseases. So in healthy brains, the myelin is there once it's there. So if you have a bad habit you're trying to break, all is not lost. I have broken many bad habits in my life, but you have to create a totally new pathway that bypasses that old pathway. And you have to pay very conscious attention at all times to your new habit so that you start myelinating that new pathway and you don't further myelinate the old pathway. It feels very, very bad to create a new habit because the old one is so automatic. If you're not thinking consciously about doing the new habit, it won't happen. You'll revert to your old habit. And it feels really arduous because you aren't used to thinking that much about having to do this particular skill. And so people don't like it, and I don't blame you. I've been through it myself. It feels kind of terrible. But that is the way to create new habits, is to have the new habit in your conscious awareness and make sure you are always doing it at all times so you create that pathway. So the takeaway from this conversation on pathways is to always be asking yourself while you're practicing, which pathway am I reinforcing right now by how I'm practicing? I'll say that again because it's important. Which pathway am I reinforcing right now by how I'm practicing? I think that question goes a long way towards reinforcing the wrong one by accident. Often when people are frustrated in their practicing, they feel like, oh, I've been practicing so much. Why can't I play this? When they take a step back, you realize, oh, wait, you have been reinforcing a pathway that's adjacent to what you want to reinforce, but not actually the thing you want to reinforce. And that's why things aren't working. So constantly asking that question, what am I actually reinforcing by how I'm playing right now, goes a long way towards making sure that you end up with a pathway that's myelinated that goes to your house and not something else. So I said that we would talk more specifically about what the practicing process should look like. So I want to turn now to talk about a study that was done on basketball players to look at this in more specifics. I should say also this study comes from a large body of research that looks at what separates top performers from everyone else in terms of how they practice. And this research has been done on athletes, on musicians, on lots of different people doing lots of different skills at all different levels of skill, including up to like Olympic athletes. So this isn't something that only works for beginners or only works for elite musicians or something like that. It works at every stage of the process. The basketball study that we're going to talk about today was done on high school varsity basketball players, and it focused on free throw shooting. So getting better at shooting free throws. Before they started practicing, all of the basketball players were asked, do you have a goal when practicing these free throws? If so, what is it? If they said yes, they have a goal, then they were asked, what do you need to do to accomplish that goal? So asking them to sort of reflect on what they were thinking about going into this practice session. While they were actually practicing their free throws, if they missed 2 shots in a row, they were asked, what do you think you need to do to make the next shot? Why do you think you missed those last 2 shots? And when they made 2 shots in a row, they were asked, why do you think you made those last 2 shots? So again, asking them to reflect on their process and sort of what was going on during the practice session. So after they did all of their practicing, the experimenters looked at the basketball players that were performing at the top and the basketball players that were performing at the bottom. And they looked at, okay, how did these different groups, top performers, bottom performers, how did they answer these questions differently, if at all? And what they found was really interesting. So when they were asked, do you have a goal when practicing these free throws? If so, what is it? The top players had really specific goals. They would say things like, my goal is to make 10 out of 10 shots or to keep my eye on the rim of the basket. Whereas the bottom players had really general goals. They would say things like, my goal is to make baskets or to concentrate more. So specific versus general in setting goals. When they were asked, what do you need to do to accomplish that goal? Again, the top players had really specific intentions. They would say things like, I need to keep my elbows in, or I need to focus on the back of the rim. Whereas the bottom players had really general intentions. Again, they would say things like, I just need to do my normal routine, or I just need to focus. During the practice session, when they were asked to reflect on why do you think you made those last 2 shots? Why do you think you missed those last 2 shots? Again, the top players pointed to very specific technical issues that either hindered their ability or allowed them to make the shots that they made. And then again, the bottom players had really general reasons they pointed to, like focus, like, oh, I just wasn't focused. So at every step of this process, from setting goals to what your goals are, to reflecting on what's going on in the practice session itself, top players are much, much more specific than bottom players. And again, this comes from a large body of research that finds the same thing, that people that perform at the top of their field, whatever that is, it's not that they're automatically better. It's not that they were born better. It's not that they're more talented. It's that they are way more specific at every stage of the process when they're actually practicing. They actually make the same amount of errors as the bottom players. They're just much more specific in how they tackle that. So one of the main researchers in this area, his name is Barry Zimmerman, and based on this research and this need for specificity, he has come up with a three-step model for effective practice. So here it is. Step one, he calls the forethought phase. This is the goal setting phase. So before you even start practicing, you want to set really specific goals for the practice session and choose specific practice strategies to achieve those goals. Again, the more specific, the better. Saying, I just want to sound better. That's not specific enough. Be really, really, really specific. What exactly do you want to sound better? Like, what measure does not sound good? Why does it not sound good? Be as specific as you can. Step two is known as the performance phase or the self-monitoring phase. So in step two, you're going to put your chosen strategies into practice and monitor how you're doing. And then the step three is the self-reflection phase. So you're going to evaluate how you did and why things went well or didn't go well. So while you're actually practicing, it's a constant rotation between steps 2 and 3. You pick a practice strategy, you put it into practice, evaluate how you're doing. If things went well, great. If things didn't go well, why not? And then you go back to step 2. So it's this constant revolution between steps 2 and step 3. And again, you want to be as specific as you can with all of this. Something that really helps with being specific is known as rubber ducky debugging or rubber ducking. Some of you may have heard this before. This comes from computer science. The story behind this, the text on the screen is from Wikipedia, as you can probably tell. There was a computer programmer who had bugs in his code that he could not find. It wasn't working, but he couldn't find the errors. And so kind of out of desperation, he got a little rubber duck and he decided he was going to go through his code line by line and explain to his rubber duck what each line of code was supposed to do. And by doing that, he was able to discover where the mistakes were in his code. So I advocate that people do this out loud while they are practicing with this three-step model. So get yourself a little friend of some sort, a rubber duck, a stuffed animal, doesn't matter. Get yourself a little friend and do this process out loud. Before you start practicing, tell your rubber duck or whoever you have what your goals are for the practice session and what practice strategies you're going to use. I always tell people to describe this to your rubber duck as if they are somebody who doesn't play your instrument, that they know music, but they don't play your instrument. So you have to be really specific. And then while you're actually practicing, you want to be doing steps 2 and 3 also out loud. If things go well, describe out loud. Okay, that sounded good and it's because of XYZ. Or I didn't quite play that right and I think it's because of, my wrist was in a funny place. I'm going to try it again and I'm going to do this with my wrist to see if it makes a difference or whatever. But do it out loud and be as specific as you can. What I find is that if people do this process out loud for about 2 weeks, then either they decide, okay, this is the most helpful thing I've ever done. I am continuing to talk out loud for the rest of my life while I'm practicing, or it has clarified their thinking enough that they feel like, okay, I'm going to put it back inside my brain. I'm somebody who prefers to do it inside my brain rather than out loud while I'm practicing. But whenever I do this with students, always the feedback is, wow, that is immensely helpful to have to talk out loud. It clarifies your thinking. It makes you really slow down and think through what you're trying to do and why, and it helps you problem solve much more quickly. Something else that really helps with this process specific to musicians is recording yourself. In the research looking at what separates top musician performers from everyone else, when musicians are sort of left to their own devices to practice kind of in whatever way that they want, the top performers almost always choose to record themselves as part of their practicing process. I think a lot of people are hesitant to record themselves for a couple reasons. One is the cringe factor, right? That you don't like what you hear and you really don't want to listen to it. The other is the time factor that people think, okay, I have to record like the whole entire piece or some big long, thing of music. And then you have to listen to that through and you don't have time for that, right? That takes too long. A much better way to use recording is to pick a small thing that you want to work on. Once you think it sounds good, record just that, like 10 seconds of music at the most, and then listen back and see how it sounds. This is how I practice. So I will work on something for a little bit. Once I think it sounds good, I'll record just that. It's just a tiny little snippet of music, and then I'll listen back, see how it sounds. If it sounds good, great, let's do something else. If it doesn't sound good, it's always clarified for me what exactly needs work based on what I hear on the recording, and then I practice a little more, then I record again, and I go back and forth in that way with the recording device. Um, I also use recording to help myself problem solve. Sometimes I can hear that something really doesn't sound good, but I can't quite tell what the issue is, what's causing the issue. And so then I will record myself, either video or audio, and almost always listening back or watching back, I'm able to tell, oh, that's why. Okay. And then I know where to attack the problem. So recording is a really, really powerful way of doing this self-monitoring process. So if you're not recording yourself, I highly recommend doing it. I will also say that the cringe factor goes away pretty quickly. When I first started recording myself back when I was an undergrad, the sort of distance between how I thought I sounded and how I actually sounded was quite wide. But very quickly it started to get closer and closer and closer together. And these days I'm rarely surprised by what I hear on a recording. It reflects what I thought it sounded like. So the more you record yourself, the more accurate your ears get in real time, and then that cringe factor goes away. So that's the end of our first topic, which means it's time for people to get to try out some of these things. Um, uh, Ethan asked a question, do people ever write it down or is that too cumbersome? You can absolutely write it down. Some of my students will write out a list of their goals before they start practicing and then basically check them off as they go along. I do a somewhat similar process to that in that at the end of each practice session, I write down what didn't sound good or what I need to work on, and those are my goals for the next day. And then I just have a list right there for me. So writing it down can also be very powerful in the moment of practicing, doing steps 2 and 3 by writing it down, that does seem too cumbersome, like reflecting out loud and trying again. So doing it just verbally seems to work better. So hopefully everybody is at their instrument and can try these things out. If you're not at your instrument, you can try it out in your mind maybe. What I would like us to try is putting this 3-step model into practice. So if you have a little something, a little friend, a stuffed animal, a rubber ducky, anything that you can talk to, then get your little friend, whoever they are, pick something. I'm gonna give you, let's see, what time is it? It's 2:40 my time. Um, so I'm gonna give people about, I don't know, I want to say like 7-ish minutes to try this out. So pick something relatively short that you know you want to work on. Describe out loud what the issue is to your friend. Figure out what your goal is, describe what your goal is, describe the practice strategies that you're going to use, and then start to practice. And based on what you hear, whether it sounds good, whether it sounds bad, again, narrate out loud. Okay, I'm hearing this, that sounds good. The reason I was able to play that is because I did X, Y, and Z. Or I'm not so happy with that. I think the problem is this. This is what I'm going to try and why, and then put it into practice. And again, evaluate out loud. So I'm going to leave this slide up here so people can see it. But yeah, I'll give you about 7-ish minutes, I think, to try this out, and then we'll come back and talk about it. You can ask me questions about it, tell me sort of how it went, and then we'll go on with our next topic. So I will see you in about
Hey, and Molly, I have a
7 minutes. Yeah,
question.
yeah, sure.
Can you hear me?
I can,
So,
yeah.
that's great. We'll take a pause there. I brought my computer into another room where a piano is. I probably won't come on camera, but do you think it would be helpful for me to sort of try this out loud if as part of the interim, or do you think it's better done just kind of give everybody silence and they can do their own thing?
It's totally up to you. I mean, also because this is a podcast right now, right? Usually I allow everybody to just do it in
Yeah.
silence and try it out themselves.
Okay.
Without somebody
Yeah.
else kind of distracting them, talking in their ear, but totally up to you because this is
Yeah.
your podcast.
Okay. Well, I don't have anything top of mind to practice, but I've come up with something during that time. I'll start doing it. Okay. And then you
Okay.
can always cut me off whenever.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Okay, here I am. I'm gonna give this a try,
All right, go for it.
and I'll do my best. Here we go. All right. Well, I found this book, Bach Three-Part Inventions. I played this invention before, but I always have to get it under my fingers. So, um, okay. So my first step here, even before I start practicing, set specific goals for the practice session and choose specific practice strategies to achieve those goals. All right. I have a little mask here that I came home from Peru. I'm going to talk to that. And I'm going to say, I am going to just focus on the first measure of this invention. And my goal is to um, just play the right hand. And I am going to literally just read the music. And if I get done with that, to my to my happiness, then I will practice the left hand alone. And then if both of those sound good, I'll work on both hands. That's probably going to take up the time. So here we go. Right hand. Okay, great. So I have my notes under my fingers. Okay, so that was sort of the performance phase. I played it slowly. Put the chosen strategy into practice and monitor closely how you're doing. Okay, I'm doing that. And self-reflection phase. Evaluate how you did and precisely why things went well or didn't go well. All right, I think that went well. I played all of the notes. I did not focus much on the markings around volume and whatnot. Um, but I think the reason it went well that I hit all the notes is that number one, I played it before, and number two, I started at a pace that made sense for me. Okay, I am going to repeat it, and the goal of this little repeat is to try to pay attention to the markings around the volume. I can't think of the word for this. There's a word for it.
Dynamics?
So I have a mezzo forte in the beginning. Dynamics, there you go.
Yeah.
There's a mezzo forte in the beginning, and then after the first three notes, there's a small crescendo, and then there's nothing else dynamics wise. There is a phrase marking across everything, so I'll make sure I try to connect the notes. And I'm not gonna worry as much about the phrase marking. I'm going to pay mostly attention to the dynamics. So here we go. Okay, great. I definitely increased in volume at the appropriate time. Sounded about mezzo forte. Still a little bit slow. It's still a little bit choppy. And so my next goal will probably be to either repeat it to just get that a little bit more in my fingers or refine it in some way. So I'm going to choose just doing it again just to see if I can't do it a little bit better, which I should be more specific. I am going to focus on the first seven notes, correct volume, volume increase, and then no more volume increase after the notes 4 through 7 or 4 through 8. Okay, here we go. interestingly enough, thinking about the dynamics maybe mess this up, which is fascinating. I don't want to do it again because I've made a terrible pathway in the snow. All right. I'm just, how can I make sure I don't make that mistake? All right. Just to give myself the added benefit of not making the mistake again, I'm just going to play the part that I messed up there, just to make sure it's under my fingers. And look at the fingers very specifically and name the numbering. So I have 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. All right. I'm going to do that a few more times to make sure it's under my fingers. 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. A little faster just to get it in there. 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. And then I'll just make that transition from the previous note so that I have that. So 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. And I want to make sure that transition is good because that's kind of what threw me off. 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2. And I'm going to try it one more time. The goal is going to be to make that transition well. The volume is secondary, but it is the secondary goal to get the dynamics correct for the first 7 notes, and then there's no change in volume after that. So after the change in volume, the primary focus is I got to get that transition in the last 8 notes correct. Did it. Wonderful.
Awesome. I'm going to cut
How'd
you
you
off
do?
there.
How's
Thank
the
you. So
time?
this is
Perfect.
that's good. I'm going to cut you off there. That was great. Thank you for doing that. That's probably the first time anybody has actually practiced live on the air, I would think. Um, so thank you for
Wonderful.
doing that. That's actually a great demonstration, and I loved how you identified, oh, wait a minute, when I tried to do the dynamics, I kind of messed up the notes. Why did I do that? Oh, maybe I should focus just on the part I messed up, do that, solidify that, then put it back into context. That was fantastic, and that was really great, specific problem solving. Um, so I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment so we can talk more easily if people have questions. Ethan, I'm curious for you, how did it feel doing that out loud? My guess is you don't typically do things out loud like that when you're practicing. So I'm curious what your experience was doing that. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Can
Yeah.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
And it sounds okay, right?
Yep.
It's not weird. I'm always willing to do something weird, especially if it's just me, but and also, for other people's benefit. Um, I love that actually. Yeah, yeah. I mean, here's what's fascinating. I loved it more than I thought I would. You were talking about how people do it and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, that was great. That was really helpful." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, some people must never, they just
Yeah.
don't know about these techniques, so must get really excited about it the first time." But like I did it, I was like, "Oh man, like I really stayed focused." It's so easy. Okay, listen. It's so easy these days, especially with social media and all the dopamine stuff going on, to just roll off into nothing,
Yep. Yep.
and having that narrative going on, it's
Yeah.
very hard to get off track.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's what my students say too, that like, yeah, they really stay focused rather than sort of meandering everywhere or practicing kind of mindlessly. And I think often like your experience of, oh, when I tried to do the dynamics, now I'm messing up the notes. I think that's a really common experience that a lot of us have had. And I think a lot of people's solution to that is to just kind of keep playing it mindlessly rather than doing what you did, which was like, wait a minute, why did that happen? What can I do about this? Oh, maybe I need to isolate because it wasn't the whole thing that got messed up. It was just that little part, right? And like, okay, maybe I need to isolate that part, make sure it's okay. And now let me put it back in context, make sure that's okay. Okay, now let's try the whole thing. That was a great kind of step by step, here's how to solve this. And I find that, yeah, when people do things out loud, their thinking around how to solve problems is more logical like that, that it's
Yeah.
like step by step, like, oh yeah, this makes sense to do this, rather than trying to do too many things at once and getting frustrated with it.
It's so easy when you're not explicating it to imagine something productive is going on in your head.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what I find with my students, and I teach a class on the science of practicing at NEC, and almost all of the assignments are they have to record themselves practicing for me to watch and give them feedback on, and they have to watch them too. And one of the first assignments is exactly what you just did. Practice something, do this three-step method out loud. And students are often like, yeah, I started doing it out loud and I realized I was trying to do 500 things at once and I started explaining it and I realized like, wait a minute, like take one thing at a time. Don't do a million things at once and think you're being productive and you're not. Actually, and explaining it out loud kind of forces that because you can't explain five things at once, right? You have to put them in an order so they come out of your mouth.
We've come such a long way. I mean, I don't want to get too off track with your presentation, but I remember being in high school, and this was in the 90s, and my teacher would literally just say, "Okay, practice this piece,
Right.
practice this piece, practice this piece," and then she'd come back. I'd come back the next week and say, "Did you practice?" And I'd
Right.
be like, "Well, I fooled around with something else," but I didn't realize until further down the road. I don't know how to practice. What do you mean
Right.
practice? Practice? What do you mean? What do you
What does that
do?
mean? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think we all had that experience that our teachers will, okay, practice this for next week. Okay, but what does that mean? Like nobody's ever taught like how actually to practice. And a lot of, as we'll get into, this is a good time to take a break and go to the other
Okay.
link. But as we'll talk about after the little break, when we talk about breaks and random practice in particular, they're really counterintuitive. Good practice methods aren't always things that people will automatically think of. And so if students, especially kids, aren't taught specifically, this is what practicing should look like, this is what you're supposed to be doing, how in the world would they just intuit that themselves and figure it out, right? You won't. Um, and so, yeah, I think your experience is very common that, what are you supposed to do? I don't know. You're just going to fool around on on your instrument.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's just going to get better and better throughout into the future, and there'll be some other hurdle that people have to encounter in terms of being better musicians. But I'm optimistic that this becomes more integrated, and of course, you learn so much from playing an instrument. This is one of the things you can learn, right? It's not about
Right.
just playing the instrument; it's about how to practice, right? How to come
Right.
to habit, all those
Exactly.
things.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, learning how to problem solve, learning how to kind of look at something like this is not working the way I want. How do I fix this? What do I try? What you decided to do just now worked really well and it did fix the problem. But if it hadn't or it made it worse in some way, then you would have had to be like, well, that was weird. Why did that happen? And kind of, look at it and experiment with different things. And that is a skill, being able to look at a problem, take it apart in that way, look at it from different angles, break it up, experiment with things. And that's a skill, like you said, that can be applied to anything, not just learning an instrument.
Wonderful. All right, so you want to do the transition here?
Yeah, this is a good time for it.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a quick outro.
Hmm.
We'll jump onto that other link,
Hmm.
and then we'll see if people need to take a minute to join. Folks, if you're here and you want to continue, well, to be honest, let's do this. If folks are here and you showed up for the radio hour and you want to continue, I'm just going to pop the link in for you because you're an exclusive audience and you can jump right on in. And we appreciate your presence here at the radio hour. So let me grab that. Nobody else will see it. If you're on the socials, sorry. If you want to quick try to jump into the Zoom before we share this, then that's fine.
A bunch of people
Um,
show up all at once.
yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm going to copy that, and yeah, just make sure you copy it there if you're in the Zoom audience and you do want to continue with this. But in the meantime, that's the last time I'll paste it, and I am going to jump over and do our outro, and then we'll see everybody who wants to join the masterclass in a minute. So, thank you very much for joining us for today's masterclass, or sorry, for today's radio hour, which indeed was part of a masterclass. And we appreciate Molly Gebrian for joining us and helping us learn how to practice better. In terms of the uh, the session today, it's been a wonderful musical journey once again. And as always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. This is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today by signing up for this session individually, you can make your life more convenient by subscribing to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 a month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area as well as automatic registration. For each week's new session, sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, the Substack, the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as the newsletter, which you can subscribe to at our homepage, pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Without further ado, we'll sign up from the radio hour, and we'll see you all in that masterclass momentarily. Bye-bye.